I was born without knowing my parents. I grew up in an orphanage. It was one of those old-fashioned ones where the matrons believed in harsh discipline. They believed that if they showed us any kindness, it would go straight to our heads and make us think we're better than the other kids. So they treated us like animals. We weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to, and if we did, we were put into solitary confinement for the entire week. We had no beds. We slept on the floor in a room full of spiders and rats. There were no toys or games. We spent our days scrubbing floors in the matron's toilet. We weren't allowed to play outside or even look out the windows. If we did, we'd be locked up for a whole month. The only time we were allowed outside was when we were paraded around the grounds like dogs on a leash, so the matrons could show us off to potential adopters. There was one rule: don't talk to strangers. But there was never any explanation as to why. All we knew was that if any of us talked to a stranger, the punishment would be swift and brutal. From the ages of 2 to 18, we'd line up against the wall and get beaten with leather straps until we bled. When I turned 18, I was told I was too damaged to be adopted. So the head matron made me her personal servant. I cooked, cleaned, washed clothes, and made sure the gardens were immaculate. The other orphans called me the gardener because I spent most of my time outside. It was the only place I could breathe without being watched. The head matron assumed I didn't know how to read or write, so she never gave me any chores involving numbers or letters. One day, while I was weeding the flower beds, a woman came up behind me and asked me to read the writing on the gravestone. At first, I thought it was a game. Then I realized the woman wasn't like the others. She was different. She looked kind. She smiled at me. I wanted to talk to her, but I remembered the rule about strangers. So I just shook my head and went back to work. The woman came back the next day and asked me again. This time, I stood up and read the inscription. It said, "Here lies little Timmy. He loved gardening." She then asked me if I liked gardening. I shrugged and went back to my flowers. That's when the head matron came and dragged me away. "Why did you answer her?" I screamed. "You were supposed to ignore her." "But matron," I said, "she wasn't like the others." "That doesn't matter. No one is allowed to talk to strangers." She then dragged me to the shed, pushed me inside, and closed the door. It was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. I started to panic. Why hadn't I just ignored the woman? What would happen now? I heard the door open, and the woman from before entered. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered. "Don't be. I won't hurt you." Then she began to stroke my hair. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Kindness. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She licked my ear. I slapped her. "How dare you touch me?" I shouted. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the head matron screamed, "You dirty animal! You have brought nothing but filth and disease upon this house." She then ordered the other matrons to lock me in the solitary confinement room for the next 3 months. As they dragged me away, I saw the woman standing in the doorway. She was smiling, a very scary smile. I hated her for what she had done. I hated her for making me feel something other than hatred and pain. But as the months passed and my punishment continued, I began to realize that what the woman had done was not wrong. She had given me a taste of heaven compared to where I had come from. When I finally emerged from that room, the woman was waiting for me. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Do what?" she replied. "Let me take you away from here." "You silly child. Don't you understand that I'm your mother?" "You're not my mother," I said. "The head matron is my mother. She gave birth to me." "Oh, no, you are mine," she said, pulling out a silver locket. Inside was a picture of me as a baby being held by a woman who looked exactly like my mother. "Do you recognize this woman?" "No," I lied. "Well then let me introduce you to her." Suddenly, the head matron appeared. "What are you doing here?" she screamed at me. "You filthy animal. You will never escape this place." "Oh, you stupid cow," my real mother said, stepping forward. "I am your superior. I am the director of this place. I was undercover to see how you treated the children." She then ordered the matrons to be locked up. "And as for you," she said to me, "we have so much to discuss. Come with me." I looked back at the room where all the orphans were kept. I wanted to go back. I wanted to warn them, but when I turned back to my mother, I saw a look of pure evil on her face. And when I knew I had truly escaped hell, only to find it again in the guise of my own mother. I was never good at my job, but lately I've been getting a lot of complaints about how long it takes me to do my work. This is because my mind has been wandering a lot lately. My coworkers say that they can tell when I am spacing out, because I have this habit of biting my thumbnail. When I get lost in thought, I unconsciously bite my thumb until it bleeds. I don't know why I do it, it just happens. Lately, I've been having these weird dreams that always start with me running. I'm always running from something or someone, but I never see what or who I'm running from. I just feel this overwhelming sense of dread. And then I wake up in a cold sweat. My boss called me into her office today. I knew what was coming. It wasn't a good conversation. She said that if my performance didn't improve, I would be fired. So now I'm even more stressed than usual. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store to pick up some food. As I'm checking out, I noticed this old woman staring at me. She had this creepy smile on her face and her eyes were like two holes in my soul. I quickly left the store and went home. When I got home, I noticed that all of my plants had died. They were all wilted and brown, and one of them had a big chunk taken out of it. I was really upset. I loved those plants. I don't know what happened. As I'm making dinner, I start to feel this overwhelming sense of dread again. I tried to shake it off, but it just wouldn't go away. Suddenly, I feel this pain in my leg. I look down and see this big red mark. It looks like a burn, but it doesn't hurt. I go to the bathroom to look at it more closely. That's when I notice something strange. The mark is shaped like a thumbnail. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then I started to panic. What if this old woman from the grocery store did this to me? I tried to call the police, but they didn't take me seriously. They told me to come in and file a report, but I couldn't go to the police station. I was too scared. So I spent the night at home alone, just watching the news and drinking. I didn't sleep at all, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creepy old woman smiling at me. In the morning, I got a call from my boss. She told me that someone had seen me at the store, and they told her that I looked like a crazy person. I knew that she was going to fire me. I could hear it in her voice, so I didn't even try to argue. After she hung up, I went to the bathroom to look at my reflection. That's when I noticed that all of my teeth were gone. I was terrified. I didn't know what was happening to me. I tried to call my dentist, but his office wasn't open. So I went online and found an emergency dentist. I called and made an appointment. Then I drove to the dentist's office. When I got there, I explained to the receptionist that I needed to see a dentist right away. I told her that all of my teeth were gone. She looked at me like I was crazy and told me that I would have to wait. I got really angry and started yelling at her. That's when she noticed that I was bleeding. My hands were covered in blood, and so was my mouth. I didn't realize that I had been biting my thumbs. The receptionist screamed and ran out of the office. That's when I knew that I needed to get out of there. I stumbled out of the dentist's office and onto the street. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't stay there. As I'm walking down the street, I see the old woman from the grocery store. She's sitting on a bench smiling at me. I try to run away, but she's too fast. She grabs my arm and pulls me onto the bench with her. She looks at me and says, "You shouldn't have come here." I scream and try to run away, but she's holding me down. She leans in close to me and whispers in my ear, "It's too late. Now we're both cursed." Then everything goes black. Hello everyone. Today, I will tell you a unique short horror story. A man woke up in the middle of the night from a nightmare. He turned on the light, but it wasn't his wife sleeping next to him. Instead, there was an old woman with a horrifying face. The man screamed at the top of his lungs. What do you think he did next? Well, that depends on your own imagination. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in this situation. Would you have run away from home or called the police? Well, our hero didn't do any of that. You know why? Because he couldn't move. The man was so scared that he couldn't move a single muscle. And no wonder, because the old woman leaned closer to him, and instead of going away, she started to caress his arm. The man wanted to scream, but his vocal cords didn't obey him. It seemed as if some invisible force was holding him down. He tried to call for help, but his lips didn't form the sounds he wanted. He tried to move, but it was useless. The man could only watch in horror as the old woman caressed his arm. Her fingers were long and bony, like the claws of some kind of monster. She smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. The man shuddered. Then the old woman suddenly stopped her sinister caress and disappeared. When he finally came to his senses, he saw his wife sleeping next to him. Everything seemed fine, so the man went back to sleep. However, he had another nightmare. The same old woman climbed on top of him and started sucking his face. She smelled like decay and dirt. Then she whispered something in his ear, but the man couldn't understand what she was saying. Her hot, fetid breath made him nauseous, but even that was not the worst. The worst part was that the old woman licked his ear with her disgusting tongue, and then she bit him right through the cartilage. Blood spurted out. The man screamed and woke up. He turned on the light and saw his wife again. She was sound asleep. The man wanted to wake her up, but he hesitated. After all, he didn't want to seem like a madman who was having some kind of delusion. So he got up, went to the bathroom, splashed some water on his face and lay down again, but he couldn't fall asleep anymore. Time passed slowly. Each minute seemed like an eternity. The man kept tossing and turning, trying to get some rest, but it was no use. He could only think of the old woman with her sharp teeth and claws. And then he noticed something strange. His wife was still sleeping peacefully. But why? Didn't she feel his tossing and turning? Didn't she hear his screams? Or maybe she was pretending to be asleep. The man got up again and went to the bathroom. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, he noticed that his ear was bleeding. He touched it, and his fingers came out covered in blood. The man was horrified. What was that old woman doing, biting him? Was she a vampire? But vampires don't exist, do they? He returned to bed and pulled the blanket over his head. Maybe if he just pretended to be asleep, whatever that nightmarish thing would pass by unnoticed? He waited. Outside, the wind started to pick up, and the old woman from his nightmare appeared again, standing by the bed. only now she was even uglier than before. Her eyes glowed red in the darkness, and she was smiling, baring her sharp teeth. The man wanted to scream, but no sound came out of his throat. He felt as if he was being pulled towards the old woman, although he didn't move a single muscle. She leaned over him and whispered something again, but he still couldn't understand her words. Then she began to caress his arm with her long, bony fingers, and he felt a sharp pain in his chest. The old woman continued to whisper something, and then she disappeared. When the man woke up, he found himself lying on the floor. His sheets were soaked with sweat. The clock on the bedside table showed 3:33 a.m. The man sat up, trying to get his breath back. He needed to get out of there. This house was cursed. But then he heard a knock on the door. Who could be knocking at this hour? The man hesitated, then got up and went to open the door. Standing on the other side was the old woman from his nightmare. In her hand, she was holding a silver cross. Seeing the man, she smiled and said, "Don't you recognize me?" Then she leaned closer and whispered, "I'm your guardian angel.